Hey guys, it's Lisa, and today we're going to make over a few items, and we're going to start with this large wooden tray. It's just wooden all over, and it has a good finish on it, so I'm not going to bother that finish. And all I'm going to do, I saw a tray done like this, or similar to this on Pinterest, so I wanted to just paint that outside in the color cotton. So I didn't even paint the top of the outer edge. I just painted the very outside. If you've never tried to do grain sack striping on a tray where it dips in like this and you have to do those sides and keep it straight, I don't really recommend it. It's very hard to get that straight. And in the end, I don't think I got mine completely straight, but it's enough to get by. So, like I said, it's hard for me to get that straight. And I did measure for my center, but like I said, just getting that going straight is not very easy at all. I probably should have marked both sides, but anyway, I got it okay in the end. So now I'm just kind of making some grain stripes here by using masking tape from the Dollar Tree. And this is not a good one to show you how to do these grain sack stripes on because it was just really hard. So I'm going to attach another video where I go more in detail and close up on these stripes. They're very easy to do generally, but when it dips down like this, not so much. But I'm just doing my stripes in white too, because that kind of brings that together, since I didn't paint anything but that outer edge. I didn't even paint the bottom because it had a pretty stained finish also. I just was really careful with my paint at the bottom so that it was neat. And so I'm just going to add these white stripes, the same color as the outside of my tray. And as you can see, I kind of skipped through a lot of that, and I'm just going to get through this. And like I said, I'll attach that other video that will make it a lot more clear than I could possibly hear. Now you could leave it like this, but I'm going to add a stencil right in the center of these stripes, and I'm doing this in black. So like I said, you could leave it just white and not do the stenciling. I just wanted to have some black because the rest of my vignette is going to have some black in it. So now this next item I'm doing actually for myself because I need an ice bucket. So, and I just can't ever find one like I like. So this one, I'm going to kind of paint it, and I'm not going to leave it the color cotton here. I'm actually going to be adding some antiquing glaze, some brown glaze to it, just to make it more primitive. But I'll still make it go with this vignette. I just, like I said, for me, I wanted to make it look more primitive. And this was a leather strap, and yes, I did paint that also because I didn't like the look of that leather strap. So I'll give it 2 coats of the color cotton and let those dry well, and then I take it outside and I spray a couple coats of clear coat on it, and I just use the Rust-Oleum matte finish clear, and just gave it a couple of coats. And because I clear coated this before I did my stamping, I did that in case I made a mistake. It would be a lot easier to get off. But because I clear coated it first, then I did have to use sandpaper to distress this because I wanted it heavily distressed, and had I not sealed it, I could have taken a damp cloth and did it that way. But like I said, because I clear coated it, then I had to use sandpaper, and I actually even used the sander on it because I wanted it pretty heavily distressed. And now once this stays on ink, and this is stays on that I'm using here, someone asked me because they had some bleeding of their ink when they clear coated with Mod Podge, but I use stays on, and if you let it dry well and your first coat, you do kind of a thin coat of your spray, it doesn't bleed at all. So I really like the stays on ink. And now I'm adding this brown glaze to this because I want to tone it down quite a bit. And then after I did my glaze, I went back over it again once that dried with another clear coat, because since this is going to be used, I wanted it to be sealed well. And obviously that inside is going to be safe for ice because I didn't do anything to the inside, obviously, and even the lid, I didn't paint the inside because I wanted it to be food safe. And this is a good solid ice bucket, and I really feel like it will hold ice really well because it's so thick and solid. Now I did go back over this with a damp cloth after I did this glazing because I didn't want it to be really brown. I just wanted to make it look more aged. So the way it is here, I didn't want it to be that dark. So like I said, I just immediately wet a cloth, or actually dampened a cloth, and just kind of wiped it until I got the finish that I wanted. And then I was really happy with the end result. So the next item I did was a wooden tray shaped like a leaf. And I didn't like this dark color. It even has some of a reddish tint, which I don't like at all. So I took this outside and sprayed 2 coats of clear coat on it because I knew that I was going to be dealing with some bleeding issues on this one. And even though I did that, I still ended up with some bleeding. So not sure what I need to do to this one to keep it from bleeding. I guess I could have used a primer on it. Dixie Belle has a Boss primer, but I just felt like that if that clear coat didn't seal it, then I wasn't real sure what would. But this distresses very easily before you seal it because it's got a lot of detail here to just kind of run down those little veins, and it makes a real pretty piece. And I even tried using some brown glaze on it just to see if that would kind of take away from the bleeding, but still wasn't happy with it. In the end, I ended up actually, after I did this video, I ended up painting over it again. So it actually seemed like it covered the last time. So maybe a combination of that brown glaze and then an extra coat of the clear coat, and maybe that sealed it enough to where it didn't bleed through. And also, when I went back over this in the end and painted it, I didn't use this brown glaze on it at all because I really liked the look of just that cotton white with the distressing. And here, it did have some brown glaze on it. As you can see, there was a lot of bleeding on that piece. And the next item that I'm going to put with this vignette is this Rooster Picture. And I love the art that's in it, but didn't like that yellowy, orangey stain on that frame. So I felt like black would be a better color for this frame, and I generally don't tape off my glass. I just scrape that off with a razor blade. But this one was easy to tape off, so I just went ahead and taped it off. And then I give this 2 coats of the color Caviar, which is just kind of a dull black color. And a couple of coats on this. I let it dry well, and then I just do some distressing. I could have used just the water technique where I just dampen a cloth and wipe it off. But I just use some fine grit sandpaper and just sand it around those raised areas. And then once that was dry well, then I went over this with some clear wax. And that's all that it took for this piece. And you can see already that that black really made a big difference in this picture. And sometimes you can purchase something where it's as simple as just a coat of paint on even part of it, and it changes it up completely. So I really was happy with how this one turned out. So here I am here just lightly sanding that with some fine grit sandpaper. And then I just take a rag. I don't even brush my clear wax on. I just take a rag and just kind of wipe that on. And then this one is finished. And I feel like that really updated this one. And now for my last item. I had told you guys that I was going to work some fall into my flips. Simply because I need to get stocked up on my fall items. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you my book pumpkin. And I know that many of you have probably seen these done, but we all have our own little ways of doing them, and I just wanted to put one of these in here just in case you had never seen one. So I just draw a half pumpkin here, and when I draw that pumpkin, I want to make sure that I leave plenty of flat on the bottom, because this needs to be able to set up or sit up. So I just take a few pages and just cut my outline out, and you could do this on all of your pages. You could just maybe pick up 4 or 5 pages at a time and cut that off. Well, what I end up doing actually when I do it that way is I trace it each time, and then I just kind of cut around about 4 or 5 pages at a time. But I found on this one that it was much easier to just use an X-Acto knife. So I am just taking my X-Acto knife and I'm just cutting as deep as I can. Now, because I'm using a lot of pressure here, I have to stick that blade back in there pretty often. But it does work, and I think maybe what would work better maybe would be, because it would be sturdier, would be maybe a box cutter, or I guess some people would call it a carpet knife. But this worked for me. I just kind of kept carving with it down in deeper and deeper, and then the more I worked with this, the better it cut, and the more I figured out how to cut more pages at a time. And you'll see when you do it, just be careful that you don't cut yourself. But I just kind of kept carving until I got this out. Now, I've done these pumpkins with hardback books before and just took the cover off, but I don't know if you've noticed, but the spine of those is a lot sturdier, and you really don't want that sturdy spine in this case. So I just used a paperback book here, and I just used one of those little romance type books, because that size to me worked out really well, and the pages were slightly stained, which I love. But you don't want to start with a book that is too old, because if you do, a lot of people omit this step here, but I think this is a very crucial step, and I guess I haven't ever seen anybody do this step. But I just take each individual page and crumple it up in my hands. I think that's a very important step, because that adds so much fullness to your pumpkin. And because this is stiff here, I'm just taking my X-Acto knife and slicing several slices down into that spine, and that will make it a lot more pliable. Because what you want to do is add some hot glue down that entire spine and squeeze it together just as tight as you can get it, and hold it until you're sure it's dry. And it really makes a neat pumpkin, and you can just kind of work with it. As you see that you have areas that need to be fuller, you can just kind of wad those pages up even more. And there, my spine tried to break apart, so just kind of watch that, make sure you hold it long enough. but I just crumple, and I even trim some pages if I see that some are sticking out a little more than others. And this is very forgiving because you want this rustic look. And what I also did was I just took a piece of cardboard here and cut the size that I needed for the base. I first marked it, and then I went back and cut it a little smaller than my mark, because you don't want that cardboard showing, but you want most of your bottom covered, because when you glue that on, that's going to help keep those pages separated. And then I just cut a little piece of stick that would fit down in that little hole there on the top, and you can always kind of waller that around and get it a little larger if you need to with the scissors or just your stick. But I'm just gluing that down in there, and you could use a thicker one and just kind of glue it on top, but I wanted mine to stick in there because I wanted to be able to make sure that it held really well. And now I'm just adding some faux leaves around the top just to add a little something extra to it. So you could leave it just like it is, or you could embellish it however you want. I even glued a little Spanish moss around the top of mine, just a little bit, to kind of hide that book part. But like I said, you can do whatever you want at this point. You could make this even more of a shabby look and add some lace and maybe even something unusual for the stem. But I'm just kind of keeping mine natural. Now, after I had all this glued on, I didn't want to do it before because I wanted to make sure my book was dry for the glue. But I just put a little bit of paint in some water in a little spray bottle, and I used the color Pine Cone. That's a Dixie Belle color, because watered down, it's the color of aged pages. And even though mine had some aging, I wanted to add this to give it even more aging. And I highly recommend not using a really old book for this, because the pages are just way too fragile, like I said earlier. So it's always good to spray that color on there, and you can just add a little at a time, put it out in the sun to dry, and just keep adding a little until you get the color that you want. And then I felt like this needed a little hang tag, so I sprayed some of that also on a hang tag and stamped the word fall on it, and then this little pumpkin was finished. I really like how that turned out. I've made several of these, and they can get time consuming, but they're really fun to do, and you can just kind of add whatever you want to them and make them your own. And they really are popular in my store, and I think they sell really well. And now I'll just kind of take you through the vignette. And like I said, I added some aging to some of these pieces and didn't to others, but the vignette I felt like still worked out well. And just that little bit of black paint and the distressing on that frame really helped that picture. And now these little pumpkins I made from socks, and there is a little bit of sewing on these, and I'll do a video later on how to do those. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and God bless you and your family.